Hi there, it's Elisa from AK Educational Consulting, and I am back today to cover our next step in our 8 steps to building a trauma-informed school. So if you've been following along with this series, we started off with an overview of the 8 steps, and then the last video was step 1, which is all about training your entire staff, everybody who has contact with kids in your building, on trauma-informed practices and strategies. So once you do that, what is next? So that's what we're here to talk about today. So step 2 in this process is building a consensus school-wide on an approach to discipline. And this is a really big task if you think about it. Just take a second to reflect on your building and all the different management systems that may be being used, from preschoolers or kindergartners, if you have them, up through your oldest students. And my guess is, based on my experience going into schools, is that you have a lot of different systems in place. Maybe every grade level is different. Maybe there are some grade groupings, like the primary grades use one thing and the intermediate grades use something else and middle school uses something else. Maybe you do have a school-wide approach, but in my experience, that's not very many schools. So at this point, we've got to figure out, what are we going to do in terms of trauma-informed discipline in our building? What is the type of culture that we want to build? What are our expectations for kids? And you need to think about this in various environments. So what are the expectations that we have for students in the classrooms, in the hallways, in the cafeteria, as they're transitioning to and from school each day, at pickup or drop-off areas? So you really need to think about those different environments that kids are spending their time in each day. And you really need to kind of talk through, what are the expectations going to be? What are the consequences going to be for not following those expectations? And for some of those common areas like cafeteria, bathroom, hallways, there really needs to be something in place school-wide so that you're using common language, you're using common consequences, and you have common expectations for students across all grade levels. And maybe your discipline or your classroom management systems that you're using in the classrooms are not exactly the same from kindergarten through 8th grade or 12th grade, or whatever grade levels you have in your building. But there need to be some commonalities, and there needs to be common language and consistent consequences. So these are the conversations that you need to start having with your staff. And this is not an overnight, well, none of this is kind of an overnight change, right? But this idea of building a school-wide consensus to a discipline approach is really going to take some time. So how do you do this? You start off having the conversations, right? Sitting down as an entire staff and talking about, what is important to us when kids are in the hallways? What do we expect of them? Where is the bar going to be set? And then what are the consequences that we feel okay about, making sure they're logical consequences, they make sense, right? Taking away recess doesn't really make sense for kids who are playing around in the bathroom, and that's a whole conversation for another day. But talking through, what do we feel okay about as far as consequences go, and what are the tiers going to be? So, do kids get 1 warning or 3 warnings, or how does this look? Who is responsible for carrying out the consequences and talking through these things with the students that are not following expectations? And of course, this doesn't need to be, involving a school counselor or a social worker and admin at every single level. Obviously, there are going to be those lower kind of tier behaviors that can be addressed by teachers. But there needs to be a whole plan in place. And this is really where things often start to break down for schools because this is a very difficult step. Even step one, if you think about it, going out and finding somebody to provide professional development and getting everybody together and doing all of that is a big deal, and does take time, but not the sort of time and conversations, in-depth conversations that you're going to have in order to build a school-wide, or build a consensus on a school-wide approach to discipline. There are going to be hurt feelings. Not everybody's going to agree. So just keep that in mind as you start having these conversations with your staff. So that is sort of step two in a nutshell. And I know it's a lot. This is a really big step. So I'm hoping to have some resources out soon that align to this also to really help you get started on this step. But I appreciate you joining me today. You can always comment with questions or any experiences that you've had. And I hope that you will join me back here next time when we get to step three. Thanks for joining me today.